when you're thinking about your journey and the journey that your team faced, what kind of challenges were you all looking at when it came to, formulating your strategy around lead and copper rule compliance?
Yeah, I think every public water system or water system in general, and every community obviously has its own characteristics, and they're all going to have their own challenges. So obviously we talk about age of community, size, what type of dwellings there are. For us in particular, a lot of what we have, most of our infrastructure obviously is underground, right? The last time we saw it may have been when it was installed, which goes back to the 50s and 60s in a lot of cases. And in the best case scenario, we would have documentation from that time period, which is not always the most reliable, even in its in the best state you can get it in. That's notwithstanding, the fact that these are old documents that can be lost to time. How has it's been preserved? So I think the biggest thing is accessing a lot of the old documentation about what was installed where, and in particular, trying to determine what materials specifically certain things are made of. The processes and the rules were different back when a lot of this stuff was installed. Now, not only finding the documentation, but also the methods that are required within the regulations, can be strenuous as well. Not for a good reason in a lot of cases. It's, again, we're trying to protect the public health and safety. So there is, you want to be sure about it, as sure as you can about a lot of these things, but it does come, it's a tall task in a lot of scenarios.
Thanks, Chris. Jamie, would love to bring you in on that. Is that a common thing you hear from our other Trinex customers who are facing these challenges in terms of collecting documentation for lead and copper rule?
Absolutely. Every utility, as Chris mentioned, is a little bit different. Their makeup, where their data came from, the way they collected all that data is different. How they access it is different. So pulling that all together into an inventory is quite the lift. And, there was some time, there was a little bit of a runway there, but there wasn't a lot. So pulling all that together was quite the chore. The other thing I'll say is that for all the years up until LCRI came out, the utility really only cared about the utility side of the property line. So the records around the private side of the service line are sparse. And that's a common theme I see across the utilities as well.
That's a great point that I'd maybe like to build on a little bit. For most of our operation, there's a philosophy of, working on what we are responsible for. And in a lot of ways, some of the new revisions, or some of the new rules are extend that responsibility further than they've ever been before. Because that responsibility doesn't reach back into the past, like Jamie said, the documentation, even the thinking about certain parts of the service line was clearly not as robust as it was for the side that we were always, definitely responsible for. And I think that's an underrated part of that, because I mentioned old documents and information that are subject to the methods of the time. Well, some of this wasn't anything that would be documented in some scenarios.